Hey, what's going on, Community and Culture Night group? We are so excited. Now we're having a completely new one. We're so excited that you guys are joining us today. Thank you so much for being a part of Community and Culture Night, a place and space for young adults and young professionals to gather, learn something new, and hopefully make some friends along the way. As I always mentioned before, the goal was to start this off being in coffee shops and different places like that. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we aren't able to. So still wanted to bring the awesome conversation and presentation to you virtually. So that's what we're going to do. We are really excited to have two presenters today on two varying different topics. My name is Nee Abrahams, and I'm going to help kind of moderate what's going on today. So first up, we're going to have Samantha talking about food waste, and Halie from all the way from South Carolina talking about how to start a nonprofit. So really excited for what you're going to hear today. As always, feel free to ask questions in the box, in the Facebook Live box. We will be able to read them. As always, we'll have about 15 minutes of presentation, and then we will have about 5 minutes of questions. So if at any point in time you have a question, don't hesitate to go ahead and put it in the chat, and we will try to get to it as soon as possible. So I don't want to spend too much time on myself because we have some really great conversations ready to have. So I'm going to introduce our very first presenter. Her name is Samantha. She lives in the Indianapolis area, and I'm really excited for her talk. So I'm going to bring her on right now. Awesome. Well, hey, I'm going to take myself off, and it's going to be all you. All right.
Thanks, Nee. Okay, hello everybody. My name is Samantha Avanzino, and I'm going to talk about reducing food waste in our personal lives. And so this is something that I'm super passionate about. I love talking about it. I love food, and so from that came my love of reducing food waste. So Nee is going to share his screen. It looks like we're having little technical difficulties, but I'm sure he'll get that back up and going in a second. So I'm from the Indianapolis area. I grew up on the West Coast in Las Vegas, and I moved here actually 5 years ago tomorrow. So now I call myself a Midwest transplant. And so I've loved checking out the different food scenes here, trying out different recipes and all sorts of things like that. Ooh, looks like we're getting it going. Just 1 second. All right, so reducing food waste is going to be our topic. And the way I like to think about it is really just giving food a second thought. So it just takes a little extra time, but it really can save your budget. It saves the environment. It's a win-win all around for not just you, but for everyone else on Earth. So Nee, if you want to go to the next slide for me. All right, you can go to the next one. Awesome. So today we're going to talk about food waste, why it matters, or kind of building the case for maybe wanting to consider reducing waste in your own life, what you can do, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Those can be whatever comes up. So if you have a specific food in your fridge you're trying to figure out how to use up, or if you just have an idea about something else, we can go with that. So we'll go ahead and jump in and talk about why food waste matters. So a lot of people don't know that 40% of food is wasted in America, which is just wild to me. So a lot of our food doesn't even make it to the consumer, and then a ton of it is also wasted on the consumer end of things. And so the USDA, they estimate about $161.6 billion annually in food waste. And so for us, that means about $500 per person per year. So I'm sure you have had that moment where you buy the bag of spinach and then 2 weeks later you find it in the back of your fridge and throw it away. So that at the end of the day is food waste, but it's also like waste on your budget that you bought something and you never got to use it. So most of our food ends up in landfills, and then that's where it generates methane, greenhouse gas, all of those sorts of things. So it's not only an impact on your personal budget, but then also it's impacting the environment. So that's kind of where my two passions intersect. I've always been a tree hugger at heart, and I've always loved food. So once I kind of realized those things combined, I became really passionate about reducing food waste. I like being a frugal person, so it also saves me money by reducing my waste. And so all of those things kind of interact. And then the last piece is all of this is happening while 1 in 8 Americans don't know where their next meal is coming from. And so it's just wild that we have all this food. We have more than enough food created in our country, but not enough food is getting to the people in need. So all of those things are just wild to me. And so that's why if I can reduce food waste, that saves me money. I can help get donations to food banks so that they're reducing the food waste on the corporate side by giving it to food banks and getting to people in need. So if you have passions of any of those things, whether it be nonprofit, hunger, environmental, food waste is a way you can make a difference in people's lives and on the earth. So Nee, if you want to hop to the next slide for me. Awesome, thank you. So it really happens at all levels. So the first part would be overgrowth in farms. So sometimes there's just too much being produced. And we've seen a lot of this in the news recently with coronavirus is there might be more than enough food produced, but if there isn't the means to get it to the people, it goes to waste. So sometimes that means farmers just have to let the things die on their farms. And so, you know, they produced too many tomatoes, but they only had enough orders from Kroger and Meyer to fill a certain amount. And so they just let the rest go to waste and they write it off as a write-off and they move on. So that can be one piece of food waste. And then there's ways to address that. It happens in the grocery store. So we are finding there's a lot of different requirements that a grocery store will ask of their producers. And then that means that the things, if it doesn't meet that requirement, it's either rejected and that food truck is just throwing it away, or it's not getting to the people in need. So an example would be maybe Kroger says, we want 2.5-inch broccoli crowns. So we won't accept 3 inches, we won't accept 2 inches. And so if an entire food truck, a semi truck shows up and they open the packaging and they say, this is not what we asked for, they can reject it. And now that trucker has thousands upon thousands of food that's just rejected and they can't do anything with it. And it's cheaper for them to just bring it to the landfill and get it thrown away instead of figuring out, like, can I go to another manufacturer? Can I get it to someone else? And there's lots of great partnerships that are happening, especially in Indianapolis, that they're working with. It's like a food drop so that Gleaner's Food Bank can say, hey, we'll take that. You can get a tax write-off. And instead of it going into the landfill, we'll take it because we don't care if they're 3 inches or 2.5 inches. We'll take the free food. And so that's a way that we're seeing food waste improving, but that's certainly a huge aspect. So that's how it's happening. And then on the most local level is us forgetting food in our fridge, or buying too much, or changing our minds, or the thing is a little brown or a little wilted, and so we just throw it away because we have just been raised in a way that if it doesn't look nice, if it's past the expiration date that we think is expired, then we just move on and we throw it away and we buy something else. So what I'm going to talk about for the rest of our time today is really just what are ways we can make a difference in our lives so that we're reducing our waste, we're improving the environment, and we're saving money for ourselves. All right, so expiration dates. I could go a whole topic on this. So if you have more questions about this later, let me know. But expiration dates are, I said a myth in my promo video, and that might be a little bit of a stretch, but there's no federal mandate yet on how these are labeled. So oftentimes we think that best by date or sell by date, like that's a rule, that means it is unhealthy beyond that date, that it's going to kill you. But there isn't actually any rules behind that. A lot of it is just a marketing tactic so that you will throw that away and buy more. Because if you read that and you think Best Buy and it's beyond that date, I'm going to throw it away and now I'm going to go make more money for the other company. When really just what it means is it's best by that. So that means that's at its 100% peak freshness at that date. The next day, it doesn't go to 0%. It just means maybe the next day, like it's at 98% or 95%. So those chips are still going to taste good. They're just no longer guaranteed to be the absolute best quality. And so the way I kind of live this out in my everyday life is if it's a pantry staple, or if it's something that's not raw, I just use my judgment of, okay, it's fairly close to the best by date, or I know it's spices, it could be a year or two beyond their expiration and they still have some potency and flavor, or rice and pasta. Canned goods, when you volunteer at Gleaners, which is a food bank here in Indy, or any food bank, they can donate those cans to their clients for up to 2 years beyond the expiration date. So that says that it's still safe for them to give it to their people. So it's still safe for us as consumers at the grocery store to consume it. And so there's a lot of other research about this, and a lot of talks about the sales and marketing tactics behind those things. And so I would just urge you to consider, just because you see this sell by or best by date, just think like, I don't see anything growing off of it. It looks completely normal. It still tastes fine. It still smells fine. I'm going to eat it. I'm going to save myself some money, and not just fall for the marketing tactic. The one piece I do, the one caveat, which I'm sure Nee and Rachel will appreciate because they commented about this, is dairy and meat is the one thing where I'm a little more cautious. I think dairy's super obvious. It's like cheese smells bad. Milk smells bad when it's gone bad. So if I can visibly see mold, or I open up the can of milk and it doesn't smell good, like, then I'm going to get rid of it. And with meat as well, if it's beyond the beyond date, I might go a day or two beyond, but I probably wouldn't be on that. But sometimes it's just, say you buy a new piece of meat, you open up the packaging, but you haven't cooked it all yet. It'll brown a little bit on top. That's often oxidization. That just means a little bit of oxygen has touched it. Doesn't mean it's gone completely bad. So that's kind of my life philosophy on expiration dates. It certainly saved me a ton of money, that I'm not just going by what is written down on the package, but I'm thinking critically, could I still use this? Does it still smell fine? And then I kind of go on from there. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is like what you can do. So I mentioned smelling and tasting your food beyond the best by date. Most of the time, it's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. If you're nervous, just don't use it. But there's a lot of things, especially like rice and pasta, canned goods, spices. A lot of those things can sit in your pantry for quite a long time, and you might forget about them. So those are shelf stable for a reason. They're stable. They're not going to go bad. They might be not as fresh, but they're not really going to go bad. The next thing you can do to reduce your food waste would be checking your fridge before you go grocery shopping. So I know some of you talked about on the Facebook comments that you just forget, or you buy too much, or you don't know what to do. If you start to build the habit of checking your fridge before, then maybe you can grocery shop knowing, okay, I have celery and I have carrots, so let me pick up some other things to go with that. And so if you get into that habit, then you're buying less because you're thinking in advance of like, what can I use with the things in my fridge and what can I supplement, instead of just starting with a new recipe every week and forgetting to reuse the things already in your fridge. Reinventing leftovers is another great option, and I have a couple samples later on in my slides. But if you hate leftovers, but you want to reuse them, there's really great ways to reinvent them. If you have food, put it in a scramble the next morning with your eggs if you know you're not going to enjoy it for lunch or dinner. Put it in a quesadilla with some cheese. Like, there's lots of great ways that if you know you won't enjoy it the exact way it was made in the restaurant, how can you repurpose it to something that you will enjoy? Freezing things before they go bad. That is another way to reduce your food waste. If you buy 5 pounds of chicken, you know you're not going to cook it all. Instead of waiting till the last day that it's good and then being scared of what to do with it, when you first bring it home, just put some in the freezer, and that will really help to reduce your food waste, and then you have stuff stocked up. And then I would definitely encourage you to go to savethefood.com. They have a ton of great ideas. They have calculators and estimators and how to reinvent your leftovers. They just have a ton of really awesome resources. So if you take nothing else from this time, just go check out that website. I have other resources to share as well, but they are awesome. All right. So the next couple slides, I'll try and go through quickly. This is just one of my favorite things. It's called fridge foraging. It's coined by Amanda Fredrickson. She's another great person to follow. But it just talks about reinventing what you have. And so instead of looking at a new recipe and buying all new ingredients, you look at your fridge first and you go foraging in your fridge. And then you think, okay, what can I make with that? So I have this, this, and this. Oh, well, maybe if I go pick up this at the store, I have this in the pantry, I can make something new, instead of finding a recipe and now having to buy 15 more ingredients. So Nee, if you want to go to the next slide, this is just another example of ways to make food less boring. So microwaving on half power, that can help from drying out your meats when you're reheating them. Adding acid often refreshes your leftovers or just makes things less boring and more enjoyable. my saying is everything plus cheese and bread is delicious. And so if that means making a quesadilla or a grilled cheese with your extra protein that you had from, barbecue that day, or a burger or something else, that's just a way to make food a little less boring. And then a few extras would be pickling things or adding acid. Oftentimes that's why our food feels boring at home, is because it doesn't have enough salt or it doesn't have enough acid. And so if you just keep some lemon juice on hand or vinegar, if you are adding those things into your meals more readily, it'll help you enjoy your leftovers at home a little bit more. And then the next slide is an example of creating breakfast. So this, I had some charcuterie meats left over. I had some cheese I needed to use up. I had French fries from a meal before. Instead of just thinking I have all these random things, I threw in some eggs, added some cheese onto it, and now I have a delicious breakfast. And then for a couple notes on freezing, meats cooked and uncooked are really easy to go into the freezer. If you check out that savethefood.com, they have more resources on like, how do you do this? When do you do this? What does that look like? Dairy, starches, and leftovers can often easily go into the freezer. But what I don't recommend is watery vegetables. So like cucumbers, oranges, things like that. Those can be a little more difficult, and it really changes the cell structure when you defrost them. So if you're looking for more ideas, definitely Google, see how you can reuse things. I know lots of people have just looked for ideas that they'll rice their broccoli and freeze that, and now they have extras. Or there's ways to stretch and help your food go a little bit further. So my last slide is just resources. If you are interested in learning more about this, there are some awesome people. I have a couple of cookbooks myself. So this is Cooking Scrappy, and they just have all different ideas on how do you use the ends of onions or carrots or fish bones, like things that you and even I probably am already throwing away. How can we stretch them and make something else? And then Now and Again, this is by Julia Turshen. If you're a Pas de Choux fan, she is also a Pas de Choux fan. She's awesome. And this is just go-to recipes on reinventing leftovers. So those are two awesome books. There's some great people to follow on Instagram, and then websites on where you can learn more. My last slide is just my contact information. So if you have questions, if you want to learn more, even if you just want to text me and say, hi, I saw you talk and I have this in my fridge, help me, I'm trying to figure it out. I love helping people reinvent leftovers. It brings me great joy. So hopefully you learned something, have a new idea to spark reducing food waste in your life.
Awesome. Well, Samantha, thank you so much. This was so enlightening. I had no idea, and I love how you said that, we're so conditioned to throw food away that doesn't look great, right? Because like, you don't realize how much of this is just social conditioning, right? And so it's really interesting to hear you say that, because there are things in my life that I do all the time that, you just had no idea. So what I want to do right now is just take questions. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. We have one question coming in, asking essentially, when it comes to restaurants eating food, or like restaurants like throwing away food, what's the protocol for that? Or do they, you hear every once in a while of restaurants like giving away food. Is that normal? Or do they kind of just throw away food as it happens?
Yeah, so there is actually a law that was enacted when Clinton was in office, and it's called the Good Samaritan Act. And that allows for restaurants and organizations to donate food as long as they're giving it in good faith, that they, as far as I know, it isn't, contaminated or anything. They can give their food away and they will not be held liable if something should go wrong. Now, there are like caveats to that it can't be things that were already handed out, or like a chafing tray. If it was already out in front of customers, then like it's off limits. But say they made too much food, or a wedding was canceled, or coronavirus happened, if that food never went out for service, they can donate it. So there are a lot of really great things happening, so that food waste is reduced, but there's still so much. Second Helpings, which is a local food hunger organization here in town, almost all of their food they get is from those types of situations. That JW Marriott has 4,000 pounds of bok choy because their client changed their mind, and instead of that getting thrown away, which oftentimes it is, they've created an entire charity on repurposing that food.
Oh, okay. Another question. And this is actually, okay, this is my wife.
Yeah, I can tell.
I tried to put yogurt in the freezer to make it last, and it didn't work. So I guess what dairy have you put into the freezer? Can you put dairy into the freezer? I think it's going to help our marriage.
Yeah. I would say higher fat dairy is better. So like cheeses, hard cheeses are really easy to put in. And then you just, when you're ready to use it, take it out and you can let it thaw. So lower fat, which usually means higher water content. So things like frozen yogurt is going to be a little harder, but you could do that. But when you defrost it, it's going to change the cell structure. So like maybe you could use it in a recipe that calls for yogurt, like muffins or something else, but it's probably not going to have the same enjoyable texture. So it could still be functional, just might not be as great. I see a lot of people freeze milk, or I'll freeze, like say I get a really big thing of half and half or creamer and I can't use all of that as myself. I'll freeze some in little baggies and then I take it out. I shake it up, like it might separate a little bit. So just shake it up and you're good to go. I think it's just like changing our perception of like, oh, that looks weird or that's different. But just kind of.
Okay, so on that topic of freezing, what's one thing you love to freeze that is uncommon or people don't usually think to freeze?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll freeze herbs. So that's something that obviously if you're growing a ton in the summer, you have a ton, and then you get to the winter and you really want fresh herbs and they don't exist. So I will freeze basil, trying to think what else. I think of frozen mint, rosemary. And so depending upon the herb, you can chop it up and either you can put it in oil and that kind of helps preserve it. So if you put like ice cube trays or little plastic baggies, things like that, reusable baggies, and then you can just break off as much as you need for a recipe. So I'll break off, an inch or two and put it in my oil when I'm sauteing veggies. So that's nice to add some freshness when you're in the middle of winter.
Really good question. When it comes to like frozen vegetables, there's some people say that like if you get frozen vegetables, to kind of help reduce waste, you're actually like losing some nutritional value. Is that the case? Is there a difference between frozen and fresh veggies when it comes to that?
From what I've read and what I've heard, I would have to like double confirm, but from what I've heard is usually they're picked at the peak of freshness. And so they're able to pick it, if August is their peak freshness, they're picking it and then they're freezing it instead of trying to get fresh food in the middle of November. It can depend upon the nutrition. Like if you're microwaving it and totally nuking it to the point that it's like disgusting, like that might reduce some nutrition, but maybe broiling it or using your air fryer, ways that aren't as harsh in reheating, that can help them with nutrition. But from what I've read so far, it's still full of nutrition. What can reduce nutrition, I've heard, is if you buy something and then you let it sit in the fridge for 3 or 4 weeks, that it's losing nutrition. So if you are bad at having fresh vegetables, do frozen because at least it had some nutrient.
So just a couple more questions. One, when it comes to like, I know freezing is like a big topic right now because it's really interesting. Are there certain brands or like baggies or types of Tupperware that you use, or does it matter as long as it's able to be sealed and you can just throw it in the freezer?
There are some that are better than others, like the thicker. So if you're using Ziploc bags, the thicker ones are going to keep out the ice a little bit more and taking out as much air as possible. I am personally a huge fan of stasher bags, which are silicone. So they're food grade silicone. So you can boil in them, you can steam in them, you can freeze them, and you're not going to have any concerns of the plastic getting into your food. So I'm a huge fan of those. Erica got me one 2 Christmases ago, and now like I could be a brand ambassador for them. I speak about them all the time. So those are really great, but the key thing is getting the most amount of air out, and that way you don't get freezer burn. That's what happens is if air gets in, then
okay, all right,
not great.
Last question before we wrap up. These are really good. Someone asks, I'm curious, have you found that your grocery shopping trips look different now that you're reducing food waste? Do you refrain from buying certain things, buying bulk bins instead? What does that look like for you? That's a really good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say my mom, which I think she's watching, my mom raised me this way. And so this is so innate to me to like look in the fridge, just buy what I need to add to that. So that, I think that's the biggest difference from other friends that have done reducing food waste, is instead of them being like, let me pick a recipe and then go buy all those ingredients, they're saving time and money because they're like, oh, I already have 4 of the 7 ingredients in my fridge, in my pantry. Now I just have to buy 2 more things. So it definitely makes my trip shorter because I'm not trying to find all new ingredients. I do love buying in bulk, and you can use the stature bags to reduce your plastic use. You can use those, and then you're not having to use the non-reusable plastic. And do I refrain from buying certain things? I think I just am more careful, like if I am gonna buy in bulk on something that is like spinach, like I know I can never use all of it up, so I'm like, how can I use this in other ways, or how can I put it in a smoothie? So if I do think if it's a fresh item, I make sure that I have like 3 recipes I can use it in, or that I can freeze it. So yeah, I definitely think through fresh bulk items so that it doesn't go to waste.
Awesome. Okay, well, this is definitely going to cause everyone to reevaluate everything about their life, especially when it comes to beef shopping. So thanks so much, Samantha. Where can we, I know you kind of mentioned this already, but one more time, where can we find you? How can we connect with you? What's the best way to get a hold of you if you have more questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I am on Instagram far more than I am on Facebook. So my personal handle is Samantha_Ava. So Ava's for my last name, Avanzino. I have a food Instagram. I really should use it more often. Actually had some ideas tonight. I was like, oh, I could do like a food rescue, food waste posts. So that one is In the Midst blog. And so I have both of those. But yeah, text me, message me if you're looking for ideas or recommendations. I'd be happy to help.
Awesome. And we'll be sure after this is all said and done to post that in a group so people can come find you easily if they forget. So Samantha, thanks again so much. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Awesome, guys. Well, hope you guys enjoyed that one. We have one more left to go. Halie is going to come up here in just a second to talk about how to start a nonprofit and kind of her journey of how she got to where she is now. And so I am not going to go to the deep introduction. I'm going to let her introduce herself. So we'll bring her on right now.
Awesome. Hey, guys. All right, so I'm Halie. I am actually all the way down in Charleston, South Carolina. So pretty far from Indiana, but not too far. My friend Bree is actually a part of this group and has got me involved. And so far it's been super awesome. I'm just getting to learn a bunch of different people's stories and what's going on in different parts of our country. And so a little bit about me. I went and did my undergrad. I studied special education and majored in special education, specifically on the track forward to help individuals with intellectual disabilities. And so I did that for school, and then I transitioned into teaching. I taught students with moderate to severe intellectual disabilities, and that was probably one of the best time of my life, but also had extreme difficulties and challenges as far as just working in a public school system. It was very tough. My students were great, and I enjoyed all my time with them, but just ran into a lot of challenges that I just wouldn't expect to have had to deal with. And so I did that for 2 years, and then I transitioned out into working for a private organization doing ABA therapy, which is applied behavior analysis. So still getting to work with individuals with disabilities, specifically autism. So I worked with younger clients up until about high school age as well. And so I got to spend a couple of years doing that. And while I was working as a behavior technician doing ABA, I got my master's. And so I went back to school and got my master's in applied behavior analysis and focused on a kind of a small niche, which is called organizational behavior management. And so all these things kind of started to fall into place for me and kind of work out. But once I got into organizational behavior management, I used all my past experiences, I guess, from my school experience and then kind of even what I wanted to do before in my undergrad to help kind of pushed me to wanting to be the change, which is with the nonprofit that I've started. And so our nonprofit for Be the Change is focused mainly on empowering exceptional communities through advocacy, education, and support. And so using my experience with OBM and in school and everything, I got set up with a mentor in OBM, and she kind of helped use behavioral science practices and everything to help us develop the main foundational pieces for Be the Change. So it kind of worked out very naturally. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking to you guys kind of about, I know probably talked to you for hours and hours and hours, but we only have a couple minutes. So I've kind of broken it down into kind of some legal tips, and then some tips for kind of just the foundational pieces for creating a nonprofit. And so I have my little notebook here. So I'm going to start with just some legal tips. So when creating a nonprofit, some of the first couple things you're going to have to do is file your articles of incorporation, and also depending if you would like to do a trademark for your organization. So that's one thing, is your articles. And then second thing is creating those bylaws. And so just the roles and responsibilities, kind of all the details about your board, your meetings, several different things involved in there. And then the third would be just actually applying for that 501c3. And so all of those things can be found, which is kind of my guide that we use and my co-founder, but in this book. And so this can be bought off of, I believe, Amazon for about 15 or 20 bucks. And it's just how to form a nonprofit, and it's by Nolo. And this has every single thing you could possibly need for creating a nonprofit. And I believe it's also, I think, for any state in the US. So it's not just like per, South Carolina, it could be in any state. And so this kind of walks you through starting a nonprofit. It has your articles in here, it has templates, it has your bylaws, every single thing that you could possibly need, again, is in this book. And so this was super helpful. And then we also used, me and my co-founder, Shayna, LegalZoom. So we did everything through that, which was pretty inexpensive, and just a really helpful tool to make sure that you're not forgetting anything. They have legal advisors and counselors that can kind of help double check all of your paperwork and things like that. So that's kind of my super quick legal advice, which is our legal requirement tips, which would be your filing your articles, your bylaws, and then the applying for your 501c3. Again, and all that can be found kind of in the Nolo book section. And then the second part was just really building just that foundational pieces for your nonprofit. And so we spent a lot of time with our mentor, which I would definitely recommend trying to find a mentor or a friend who has had this experience before. It's extremely, extremely helpful. And so our first thing was that we really mainly focused on was that mission statement. So I know I said it, but I'll say it again. So ours is empowering exceptional communities through advocacy, education, and support. And so what we did was kind of break it down based from our mentor's advice, but into what we do, who we impact, and then how we do it. And so every piece of our mission can then be broken down into basically a definition of what that actually looks like. So empowering, we have to give everyone opportunities for connection and success. And so everything is very clear and explicit. So that way, there's no confusion when people ask, like, oh, what's your nonprofit do? Or what are you guys about? It's very easy to see, and everyone kind of gets the picture and knows. And another thing with your mission is that, pretty much that's your guiding piece, to everything that you're doing, any projects that come your way, anything that may happen in the community, or if someone comes to you, you can kind of stop for a second and think, okay, does this fit in our mission? Yes or no? And then kind of go from there. So it just is a really good checking point for you to kind of just fall back to, is if it fits within that mission. So that took us a really, really long time. We spent hours just, each word making sure that really fit with who we are and our passion and what we were trying to accomplish, and really defining that. And so again, that took a lot of time, but was definitely worth it. And then right under that umbrella would be just your values. So the mission's kind of like your destination and what you want to do, and your values are kind of like how you get there and how you act as an organization. So for us, our values are openness and connection, authenticity, embracing uniqueness, and balance. And so again, we kind of did kind of the same thing using OBM a little bit and some behavioral sciences. We wanted to make sure it was really clear. And so we took our values and then we defined our values. And then we also did like, what are examples if I'm acting? What is, having authenticity? What does that mean for us as an organization? And so then we would list that out as an example. And then on the other side, we would write a non-example. So what does it look like if we're not being our true authentic self as an organization? And so that kind of piece right there was super helpful for us. And so it might be helpful for you as well if you're thinking about starting a nonprofit and going through these steps with your mission and values. But another thing that our supervisor did that was super helpful is she made us as individuals, it's me and again, my friend Shayna, my co-founder, list out kind of our own personal values, just who we are and our core and what's important to us. And then we were able to kind of take those, we did that separately, and then we brought them together. And that's how we kind of found our organization's values together. So then we were able to kind of find where we met in the middle and then went from there. So I know Brene Brown also has kind of like some really good tips for creating values. That might be something that you guys would want to check out. But so those were two important things that really kind of set the stage for us. We're a really solid mission, and then we followed up with our values. And again, it does take a lot of time, but I would encourage you to really to take that time because it's going to set the stage for the rest of your journey. So again, I felt like that was probably kind of a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I do have a few takeaways too that I've learned so far with doing a nonprofit while being in school and just, working as a behavior therapist and doing a bunch of other things at the same time that through all that I've learned and would like to share with you guys. So a few takeaways that I've learned is that everything that you're doing is pencil and not pen. So, you want it to be perfect because you care so much, but at the same time, it's not going to be perfect and that's okay. And knowing that everything is kind of in a way like a rough draft. And so if you do something, don't let it stop you from moving forward. Just do your best and know that if it needs to be changed, that it's okay, that you can go back and change it. So pencil, not pen is a big one for me. Just start. So I can't tell you how many times me and my best friend were thinking about this nonprofit and the difference that we wanted to make, for people with disabilities in their lives in Charleston. And we would get to a certain point, we would brainstorm and we'd have all these ideas for Be the Change. And then we would stop ourselves because we would, want it to be perfect, or we didn't know exactly how to do it, or there are all these other barriers. And so we kept just putting it off until we started working with our supervisor. And she just told us, she's like, you guys got to stop doing that. And you just have to start. And so that right there, honestly, is another big thing that I would really encourage you all guys to do if you're thinking about starting a nonprofit or any other kind of project in life is, I think we do want things to be so perfect because we care, but at the same time, it's better to just go ahead and just start. You have to start somewhere, and the rest will fall into place for you. And then a couple other things that I've learned from starting this nonprofit really is start, but don't do too much. Really, hone in and just try to focus on one or two things at a time. I know when we started, we had this huge vision for Charleston and for the disability community and all these things again that we wanted to accomplish and that are still great things to, work towards, but that, you again just have to just pick just one or two and do that really, really well versus trying to do a lot of other things because I still work a full-time job. My co-founder still works a full-time job, and it's just really, really difficult to try to do, all of that at the same time. So that's my next tip. Another one is just to be super, super organized as much as possible and taking advantage of free resources wherever you can find them. Especially we use Google Drive for a lot of things just to keep us organized and have everything in color-coded folders and set up to go. But that's kind of been a lifesaver for us in figuring all of this out together. Having a mentor is huge. huge, huge, huge. Shannon Biaggi, I know you're probably not watching this, but I really do admire and appreciate you. She helped guide us and still helps guide us to this day. So we have kind of someone to always go back to and check in with. Then the last thing is connect. So as many opportunities as you can find, even like, this connection right here, just jump in on it. Even if, you think you're not ready yet, or, you're a little nervous, I would just encourage you to give it a try and to connect with as many people as possible and to share your heart and your passions with them. And it's can't go wrong. So those are my tips, and I hope that was helpful. And I'm excited to answer any questions that you guys may have. My pup is also trying to answer or talk as well. Flowers, my huge Great Dane, is very jealous of this right now.
Well, maybe he's got something else to say too.
Yeah, she's like, let me add in.
Well, Halie, thanks so much. We really appreciate it. There's some really interesting insight. Just to kind of start us off, how do you create buy-in in your, like, starting a nonprofit? Obviously, a lot of people, like you kind of mentioned, a lot of people have a lot of things they're trying to do and create. Yeah. How do you create buy-in amongst like your people around you and then other people who we were trying to communicate with to help, like, almost like legitimize what you're trying to do?
Definitely try to find, I would say, just really like-minded people, and what your mission is, whatever it is that you're trying to come up with. Find that community of people, and really, I think on top of that, just finding other people who share that mission with you. But I think using too, like, just like this, social media is a great tool. And then I know for us, we really try to, the very beginning, we were so busy, we had so much going on. It was just us building this. And now that we've gotten to a place where we could have other people join us on our board, finding people that can relate to your mission specifically. So for us, I don't personally have a disability. So that's, finding other people in the community who do have disabilities who align with our mission and have them share their stories, and just kind of be the change as a platform for them to create, that community between us. But that's been, I feel like, another great thing is just having someone who really can speak to your mission, represent, and then, kind of allow them to bring in other people that they know, and it grow naturally like that, organically.
Kind of love that.
Yeah.
Another question, kind of regarding kind of switching gears to fundraising, because I think it's an interesting question. Question is, have you guys gotten into grant writing or any forms of fundraising? If so, what does that look like for you guys?
Yes. And so grant writing, that's actually, I was going to take a note on that. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a whole other thing and the challenge that we are facing. And so grant writing is extremely important. And I would also say, if as a nonprofit, if you know someone, anyone, that you trust, that again aligns with what you're trying to do as an organization, definitely get someone who is experienced in writing grants. I don't personally have that experience, and neither does my co-founder. So we've actually are still looking for someone to help with that. We've created, a few campaigns. One of our main programs, which I didn't even speak about yet, is Empowerment Through Employment. And so we have done a few campaigns trying to raise funds for that, and we've done T-shirt campaigns, and I think we did a mug campaign not too long ago, little things like that. But as far as grants, we're still kind of looking for someone who we feel like, again, fits in with what we're trying to accomplish and who has that specific skill set to help us. But it's challenging. So we don't personally have that person yet, but we're looking, and so I can't really speak, much about that, besides the fact, if you are trying to start a nonprofit, it is extremely helpful to try to get someone who can focus solely on just grant writing, because it's a job in itself.
Yeah, I think it's good to know, because I know some people probably think like you can just kind of do grant writing on the side. It's just like, and it sounds like it's a lot more than that.
No, it's definitely, yeah. We're still, I'm like hoping and looking for someone who would, want to take that on. Again, we've been running the fundraisers, but as far as the grants, you definitely need someone who can kind of just solely focus that. It's very time-consuming writing, and it's just very meticulous. You have to have you need to know exactly what the right things to say. And we also, with our program, we haven't actually started running it yet. And so we're in the development stage for our program. So we don't actually have any data yet to show like, hey, this is what we're doing, and we've helped, this many individuals. And so we're kind of trying to get the program development done to where we can actually get, some individuals out there, help get them, employment, and then we'll try to go back and be able to use that data to help us get further grants.
And your co-founder says grant writing is definitely a full-time job for a nonprofit. So I'm definitely affirming what you're saying.
Exactly.
So for you guys, has there been a moment, and this is a question that someone asked, since you started your organization, have you had any moments that have really affirmed, like, hey, this is the mission, like, this is exactly what you should be doing?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've definitely had a couple of moments. I know we've also had some tough moments just because we're still in so much of the development phase that I know we both are feeling like, okay, we're just ready to get started. Like, we're ready to be able to work with these individuals and, really help make a difference. So it's because we're still just trying to get all the pieces lined up, in the right place before we can do that. I know one moment, it's actually was with my co-founder, Shayna. She was in the airport and she was heading out somewhere and she saw a young man wearing, little Pikachu headphones. And so she started a conversation because she likes Pokemon and ended up meeting this young man and his mom and kind of stayed in contact with them and found out actually through the conversation that he did have a disability. And so she told him about Be the Change and, what we're trying to do and accomplish. And they became friends through social media. And then we actually went and met a local organization called Michael's Barkery, founded here in Dino Island in Charleston, reached out to us to come meet with them. And they have a pet shop and it's a grooming and bakery inspired by their son, Michael, who also has a disability and who chose to do baking treats for a senior project and like really fell in love with it. So they based this whole, business, this organization around him and his passion. And so we ended up meeting with them and then they saw the friend, or I'll just call him Pokemon. Pokemon saw that we went out there. And so she commented and asked about it. And we ended up actually getting to be a key piece into helping him get his first job at the Michael's Bakery. And so that right there, even it was the coolest thing. We got to see pictures. He still works there now. And so that really just, I don't know, was one of the moments, but there's been several, but that one really touched our hearts because we got to see someone actually, get a job and his life changed through just connection. And that's, again, another piece that organization reached out to us and we were flattered and we went out there and met them and were super inspired and it created something great.
I love that. Wow. That's a really awesome story. So I'll ask a couple more questions before we wrap up, but I'm curious, you kind of touched on this earlier. How do you manage expectations? You kind of alluded to it because, everybody wants to, take on the world and that there are all these smaller steps. So how do you guys kind of manage expectations? I know you're in the development stage. How do you guys manage that?
I think so for us, again, I want to do everything and anything with like magic wands that, I wish I had, but I don't have. And the same thing for my co-founder. We're extremely passionate and we have tons of dreams and things that we want to accomplish. And so we have like the first few minutes of our like daily meetings that we try to have, we like leave it open. So we talk about whatever we need to talk about. We brainstorm, we get everything we can think of, even if it's like 20 years down the road that I want to be able to do for Be the Change. We say it and we kind of type it out. And then we have a meeting agenda that kind of keeps us really grounded. And so we allow for us to still have that time where we're super passionate and we can exchange ideas and jot those things down. But then we also have very specific and time oriented goals. And so I would encourage people never lose that passion because that is why we're doing what we're doing. Have those moments, get the ideas, even if you would need $1 million and $1 trillion to do it. Still have that time and talk it out, but also just be extremely organized, have those goals, and then have, again, breakdowns to how you're going to achieve those goals. For us, a meeting agenda that connects with our larger goals helps us stay kind of focused and grounded, and then always going back to that mission statement. So there's been tons of opportunities that people have come to us and we look at each other and we want to do it, and sometimes we'll say yes if we feel like we truly can have that time and it fits within the mission statement, and sometimes we have to say no even though we want to say yes. And so it's just really being very mindful again about that mission and those values. So one of our values is balance. And so that kind of helps us keep in check, just to go back to those values, go back to that mission, and know that we can't even accomplish the program if we say yes to everything. So even though our hearts want to say yes, just really keeping ourselves in check.
I love that. And I appreciate you sharing that and all the things that you shared, because I think sometimes it's easy when you're, 10 years into it and kind of explain how you start. It can be really kind of overwhelming. So the fact that you're kind of sharing like, hey, I'm a few steps ahead of you and this is kind of where we're at, it's been really helpful. So Halie, thanks so much. I really appreciate the information you've given us and the, honestly, just such really great tools that we can take for people who are interested in starting a nonprofit. Where can we, connect with you, connect with Be the Change? Maybe there's somebody listening who is interested in helping, right? How can we get connected with you?
So definitely either Facebook, it's Be the Change Charleston, so you can follow us on there. And then we also have our website, which is the same thing. So it's bethechangecharleston.org. So those two things. We also have Instagram, which I'm trying to get better about using social media as its whole other, again, guys, you need someone who does just social media. We divvy it up, and we also have a volunteer who helps us with that. But so all those platforms, our website, bethechangecharleston.org, Facebook, or our social media, Instagram. We would love anything, any feedback. If you want to get involved, if you want to purchase anything, if you want to share, just anything would be appreciated.
Awesome. We'll make sure that we put all the information in the Facebook group right after this.
Sounds good. Thank you guys so much.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Well, guys, hope you enjoyed our presentations today. We had some really great conversations and some really great, interesting topics. If you guys have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. If there's something you're reading, something you've been thinking about sharing, you want to share with other people, engage in conversation, feel free to go to our Facebook group, create a thread, and start a conversation. That's kind of the goal of it. So don't hesitate. Maybe there's an idea you're sparking and you just want some feedback. We'd love to continue on with your thoughts there. Our next tonight is so pay attention to that date, mark that down, but we'll keep you updated always. Once again, thank you guys so much for participating.